What if one ordinary dinner could unravel decades of secrets? A billionaire, haunted by a love he lost, freezes when a young waitress casually mentions her mother's ring, identical to his own. That single remark sets off a chain of revelations. A hidden daughter, a vanished woman, and a past carefully buried. Now, in the clash between truth and betrayal, three lives are forced to collide, where blood, lies, and love threaten to destroy them all, or finally bring them together. The restaurant fell into a strange silence as Catherine stood frozen near the entrance, her coat slipping from her shoulders, her eyes locked on Alexander. Emily looked from her mother to the man at the table, her heart pounding. The tension was thick enough that even the other diners seemed to sense something unusual. Alexander's voice broke the silence, low but steady, heavy with 2 decades of unanswered questions. "You disappeared." Catherine's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to explain, but words refused to form. Emily's eyes darted between them, confusion twisting into anger. "Someone tell me what's going on." Catherine finally moved closer, her steps unsteady but determined. "Emily," she whispered, ignoring Alexander's piercing gaze for the moment. "Go finish with your tables, please." Emily shook her head, her voice rising. "No, not until you tell me the truth. Do you know him? Is he my father?" The word father shattered the fragile restraint Alexander had been holding on to. He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Catherine's. "Is she?" he asked, his voice rough, almost pleading. Catherine closed her eyes as if bracing for a blow. Then she nodded. The room tilted for Emily. She stumbled back, her coffee pot clattering onto a nearby counter. "What?" her voice cracked. "You've been lying to me my whole life?" Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. "I was trying to protect you." Alexander's jaw tightened, fury and grief swirling together. "Protect her from what? From me?" Catherine flinched at the sharpness in his tone. "You don't understand, Alex. There were things, dangers you couldn't imagine. I had no choice." "No choice?" He laughed bitterly, though there was no humor in it. "You stole 22 years from me. 22 years with my daughter." His voice carried across the restaurant, turning heads. Emily's chest heaved, her breath shallow. "Stop," she whispered, her world collapsing. "Just stop." She rushed past both of them, pushing through the swinging door into the kitchen, needing to escape the storm. Catherine made a move to follow, but Alexander's hand shot out, gently but firmly gripping her wrist. "Not this time," he said. His touch was both familiar and alien, a ghost from the past pressing against the present. Catherine's eyes filled with anguish. "You have every right to hate me." "Hate you?" Alexander's voice dropped, softer now. "I loved you. I never stopped. And all this time you were alive, raising our child without me." Catherine's lips trembled. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "You don't know what kind of threats were circling back then. Powerful people, Alex. People who would have destroyed you and her, if they knew." He shook his head, disbelief etched in every line of his face. "I had power. I had resources. I could have protected both of you." Catherine's tears slipped free, trailing down her cheeks. "I didn't trust it would be enough. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep her safe." The kitchen door swung open and Emily re-emerged, her apron gone, her bag slung over her shoulder. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red. "I'm going home," she said flatly, her voice stripped of emotion. "Neither of you follow me." She pushed past them, the bell above the restaurant door chiming as it closed behind her. Catherine sagged into the nearest chair, her hands trembling. Alexander stood rigid, watching his daughter vanish into the night, powerless to stop her. For the first time in years he felt the sting of regret, not just for Catherine's choices, but for his own blindness. "She hates me already," Catherine whispered. "She'll never forgive either of us." Alexander knelt slightly, his face close to hers, his eyes searching. "Then we don't give up. She deserves the truth, Catherine, all of it. No more lies. Catherine looked at him, torn between relief and fear. And if the truth destroys her? Alexander's gaze hardened. Then at least it won't destroy her in the dark. Outside, Emily walked quickly down the dimly lit street, her emotions a tangled storm. The cool air stung her cheeks, but it did nothing to numb the ache in her chest. A father she never knew, a mother who had lied, a past that suddenly demanded her attention, and above it all, the glimmer of an emerald ring that connected them all in ways she couldn't escape. She didn't know where the road ahead would take her, but she knew one thing for certain. Nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Back inside the restaurant, Alexander turned back to Catherine, his voice quieter now, though no less intense. I want to know everything tonight. Why you left, who you were running from, why you thought keeping her from me was the answer. Catherine stared at him, torn apart by the weight of secrets long kept. If I tell you, she whispered, there's no turning back. Alexander leaned closer, his voice resolute. There's already no turning back. Catherine's hand trembled on the table, the emerald ring gleaming in the soft light, binding past and present together. She met his eyes and nodded. Then you'll finally know the truth. The night outside the restaurant was brisk, the chill of early autumn sweeping through the city streets. But inside, Alexander Carter remained rooted at his table long after Emily disappeared into the kitchen. He hadn't tasted his meal, hadn't touched his drink again. His mind was too consumed by the ghost of Catherine's name and the image of that emerald ring. Every tick of his wristwatch sounded louder than the murmur of the diners around him. His instincts told him this wasn't something to ignore. He needed answers. When Emily returned with his plate, he studied her movements carefully. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, the kind that didn't come from luxury or privilege, but from someone who had grown up learning resilience. She set down his dish with a smile that was polite but distracted, clearly unaware of the storm she had triggered in him. Emily, he said softly, almost gently this time, forcing calm into his voice. Do you and your mom live nearby? She hesitated again, her brow furrowing slightly at his sudden personal interest. Yeah, a few blocks over. Why? Just making conversation, he lied, though his gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. She gave a small nod and hurried off to another table. He could sense her unease, but he couldn't help it. He had to know more. As he ate mechanically, Alexander's mind drifted back 25 years. Catherine had been everything, bright, passionate, full of life. They had met in Boston at a charity gala when he was just starting his empire. Their relationship had been intense, almost reckless. He had given her the emerald ring, telling her it was one of two in existence, the other destined for him. They had planned a life together. And then one day she was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing but silence and a hollow space in his chest where her laughter used to live. The pain had hardened him, shaping the man who eventually built an empire worth billions. Yet even with all his wealth and influence, he had never found her. Until now, perhaps. He couldn't ignore the uncanny resemblance in Emily's smile, or the way her eyes seemed to mirror Catherine's. Was it possible Emily was his daughter? The thought sent a tremor through him, a dangerous mixture of hope and dread. When Emily passed by again, he seized the moment. Emily, he said in a calm but firm tone, what's your last name? She blinked at him, puzzled. Henderson, she replied. Emily Henderson. The name hit him like a riddle half solved. Catherine Henderson. Yes, the name fit perfectly into his memories. He remembered her whispering once that she wanted to keep her family name alive, even if she married him. His pulse quickened. And your father? He asked carefully. Her eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite read. Pain, maybe anger. He passed away years ago. I never really knew him. It's always just been me and Mom. Alexander's heart pounded. Passed away. A convenient truth? Or another layer of the lie? His gut twisted. He wanted to press her, but the dining room wasn't the place. This was too important, too delicate. He needed to get close without scaring her off. By the time his meal ended, he had already made his decision. He slipped a heavy tip beneath the bill and rose slowly, giving Emily one last look. "Thank you, Emily. You've been very kind," he said with a softness that carried weight far beyond polite manners. Her smile was quick, uncertain, but polite. He left the restaurant with his mind ablaze. That night, back at his penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Alexander poured himself a glass of scotch and sat in silence, staring at the ring on his hand. He turned it over, watching the way the light caught the emerald. Somewhere across town, Catherine was alive. Somewhere she had raised Emily without him, without telling him the truth. But why? Why disappear? Why hide a daughter? The questions cut deeper than the strongest whiskey ever could. He picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen. He could find her in a heartbeat. Money bought information, and he had plenty of both. But some instinct told him not to rush. If Catherine had hidden for this long, she must have had a reason. Barging in could destroy everything. Instead, he made a call to someone he trusted, an old friend turned private investigator. "I need you to look into someone," Alexander said, his voice gravelly. "Name's Catherine Henderson. Lives somewhere in this city. She has a daughter, Emily. Find everything you can." When he hung up, he leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the skyline. For the first time in years, Alexander Carter felt vulnerable. Billionaire, mogul, titan of industry. None of it mattered when the ghosts of the past came knocking. And tonight they had knocked hard. Meanwhile, across town, Emily returned home to a modest two-bedroom apartment. She found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea, the faint glimmer of an emerald ring catching the light. "Mom," Emily said, pulling off her apron, "something weird happened at work tonight. A man had a ring just like yours." Catherine's hand froze around the teacup. The color drained from her face. "What did you say?" Emily frowned at her mother's sudden intensity. "I just told him you had one like it. He seemed strange about it. Do you know him?" Catherine's eyes darkened with something Emily had never seen before. Fear. Regret. Memories clawing their way back. She whispered so faintly Emily barely heard. "Alexander." For the first time in years, Catherine Henderson realized the past she had tried to bury was about to resurface, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The city skyline glittered under the fading night as Alexander sat restlessly in his penthouse. Sleep was impossible. His mind replayed Catherine's name, Emily's face, and the unmistakable emerald ring that bound them all together. He kept pouring himself glass after glass, though the scotch did nothing to quiet the storm in his chest. He was a man used to control, a billionaire accustomed to bending the world to his will, yet now he felt like a young man again, shaken, unsure, haunted by the ghost of a love he thought long dead. Across town, Catherine Henderson sat opposite Emily at their small kitchen table, her tea untouched, her knuckles pale around the delicate cup. The mention of Alexander's name had torn open a wound she had buried for decades. Emily was watching her closely, confusion knitting her brow. "Mom, what's going on? You know him?" Catherine drew a long, shaky breath, staring down at the emerald ring glinting on her finger. For years she had told herself she wore it as a memory of a time that had meant everything to her, but now it had betrayed her. "Yes," she whispered, finally meeting her daughter's eyes. "I knew him a long time ago." "Before you were born," Emily's stomach flipped. "Wait, are you saying he's my father?" The silence that followed was heavier than any confirmation could have been. Catherine's lips parted, closed again, then parted once more. "It's complicated," she said softly, her voice cracking. "There are things you don't know, things I've kept from you for your own safety." Emily leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "Safety? Mom, you can't just drop that on me and expect me not to ask questions." He looked at me tonight like he recognized something, like he knew. Catherine reached across the table, clutching Emily's hand. "I left that life behind for a reason. I didn't want you caught in it. I didn't want him to find us." Emily pulled her hand back, her confusion mixing with frustration. "But why? If he's my father, don't I have a right to know? Don't I deserve the truth?" Catherine's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Yes," she admitted, "but knowing the truth will change everything. It will put us on a path that can't be undone." Back at the penthouse, Alexander's investigator, Marcus, called with an update. "I did some digging," Marcus said, his voice crisp. "Catherine Henderson's been living under the radar. No flashy records, no debt, no lawsuits. She's been deliberately quiet. Single mother, steady work, modest apartment, almost like she wanted to disappear." Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. "And the girl, Emily?" "Her daughter. No father listed on the birth certificate. But the dates line up, Alex. She's 22. Which means—" Marcus didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Alexander's heart pounded. "She's mine," he muttered under his breath. His chest felt both hollow and full all at once. For 2 decades he had been deprived of a truth that now burned before him. He had a daughter. He rose to his feet, pacing the floor. "Find out why Catherine left," he ordered. "I need the truth, Marcus." "Every detail, and fast." Across the city, Emily sat awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. The fragments of conversation echoed in her mind. Her mother's fear, the weight in her voice when she spoke of Alexander. She grabbed her phone, scrolling through headlines and articles. It didn't take long before she found him. Alexander Carter, billionaire tycoon. Pictures of him at charity events, business galas, high-profile investments. A man of immense power, influence, and wealth. Her chest tightened. That man had looked at her like she mattered, like he knew her. And now she couldn't unsee the resemblance, the jawline, the eyes, the subtle expressions. She tossed the phone aside, burying her face in her pillow. If it was true, if Alexander Carter was her father, then everything she knew about her life was built on a lie. The next morning, Alexander couldn't resist. He returned to the restaurant under the guise of a casual breakfast, though his real purpose was far from casual. Emily spotted him the moment he walked in, her heart skipping. She hadn't expected him back, not so soon, not after the way he had stared at her the night before. He took a seat in her section, his presence impossible to ignore. She approached cautiously, coffee pot in hand. "Back again?" she asked lightly, though her voice wavered. "Yes," Alexander said, his tone steady but his eyes searching hers. "I wanted to see you." Emily froze for a second, then poured his coffee, her hand trembling slightly. "Why?" He studied her face, every angle, every flicker of expression. "Because," he said carefully, "I think we might have more in common than you realize." Her breath caught, the words hanging between them like a fragile thread. She forced a shaky laugh. "You sound like you're about to tell me some kind of secret." Alexander leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Maybe I am." Before she could respond, Catherine walked into the restaurant. She hadn't planned to. She almost never came by Emily's work. But something had driven her there, a gnawing fear that tonight's coincidence had been fate dragging the past back into the present. The moment her eyes landed on Alexander, her blood ran cold. He was staring at her daughter with the same intensity he had once reserved for her. Their gazes collided across the crowded room, and time seemed to shatter. Catherine's lips parted, her face pale. Alexander stood slowly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes blazing with recognition. "Catherine," he said, his voice low, dangerous with decades of pain. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too thin, as Emily looked between them, realization dawning. For the first time in 22 years, the past and the present collided, and none of them would leave unchanged. The restaurant was buzzing with the usual Friday night rush, silverware clinking and quiet conversations blending into the background hum. At a corner table under a dim chandelier sat Alexander Carter, a billionaire whose presence usually demanded attention, though tonight he was intent on keeping a low profile. He wasn't here for publicity or for business. He was here to disappear into the crowd and to think. His tailored gray suit and polished watch still caught the eyes of strangers, but he sat alone, swirling the ice in his untouched glass, his gaze lost somewhere far beyond the walls of the room. The waitress approached his table, a young woman in her early 20s with sandy blonde hair pulled into a neat ponytail, her green eyes carrying a spark of curiosity behind the polite smile she wore for all her customers. Her name tag read Emily. She balanced a tray against her hip and leaned slightly forward with practiced ease. "Hi, sir," she said brightly, setting down a fresh napkin. Her eyes flickered to his hand resting near the fork. A sudden pause filled the air. Her smile shifted, became softer, almost personal. "My mom has a ring just like yours." Alexander froze. The hum of the restaurant seemed to fade, leaving only her words echoing in his mind. He glanced down at the ring on his finger, a heavy gold band set with an emerald stone, unique in its cut and old-fashioned style. It wasn't the kind of ring one could casually find in a store. It was rare, custom-made, and belonged to a very specific past. His chest tightened. For a second he thought he had misheard, but Emily's expression told him otherwise. She wasn't joking. She wasn't making polite conversation. Her words had been simple, yet they sliced through him with the sharpness of revelation. "What did you just say?" His voice was lower than he intended, almost harsh, betraying his sudden unease. Emily blinked, startled by the intensity in his tone. "Oh, I didn't mean anything weird," she stammered, shifting her weight. "It's just, my mom wears a ring that looks almost exactly the same. I've never seen one like it on anyone else before." Her words swirled inside his head like smoke, stirring up memories he had long tried to bury. The ring had been a gift, part of a set, created decades ago. One was his. The other, he had believed, was lost forever, along with the woman who once wore it. Alexander's throat went dry. He forced himself to breathe evenly, to disguise the storm rising within him. "Your mother," he said slowly, his eyes narrowing as if studying every detail of the girl's face. "What's her name?" Emily tilted her head, confusion flickering. "Why?" "Just curious," he said quickly, masking his desperation under a strained half-smile. He tapped the ring against the glass, the faint sound unnerving him. Emily hesitated as though reluctant to share personal details with a stranger, even if that stranger was a billionaire sitting in her section. "Her name's Catherine," she finally said. Alexander's world tilted. His fingers curled around the edge of the table, knuckles white. Catherine. A name he hadn't spoken aloud in over 2 decades. A name attached to the woman who had vanished from his life without explanation, the woman he had loved and lost, the woman he had once believed to be dead. The emerald ring on his finger seemed to burn. Did she ever mention where she got the ring?" he asked, his voice tight. Emily shrugged. "No, not really. She's had it for as long as I can remember. It's special to her. She never takes it off." His pulse hammered against his temples. If Catherine was alive, if she had kept the ring all these years, then everything he thought he knew was a lie. Why hadn't she come back? Why had she disappeared? And most importantly, how was it that her daughter, standing before him now, looked like she could almost be his? Alexander swallowed hard, studying Emily's features in the dim light. The shape of her jaw, the curve of her smile, even the way her green eyes caught the light. There was something hauntingly familiar in them, something that stirred the fragments of old memories. He almost asked the question, the one burning on his tongue, but he bit it back, afraid of the answer, afraid of what it might unravel. "That's a very interesting coincidence," he finally muttered, his voice distant. Emily gave a polite nod, though she seemed slightly unsettled by his reaction. She jotted down his order quickly and excused herself, weaving back into the crowded dining room. Alexander leaned back in his chair, the weight of the past crushing down on him. Coincidence? No. There were no coincidences with a ring like this. He pressed his fingers against the cool emerald, his mind racing. Catherine alive, a daughter, a mystery unspooling before him. He had come to this restaurant for a quiet evening, but instead he had stumbled upon the one thread that could unravel everything he thought was buried. He couldn't leave it alone. He wouldn't. Something inside him told him that Emily wasn't just a stranger with a familiar ring story. She was a key to secrets he had never dared to unlock, and now the lock had been placed right in front of him. The question was he ready to open it? The night deepened as Catherine and Alexander sat across from each other in the empty restaurant. The waitstaff had begun stacking chairs, but neither moved. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap, the emerald ring glowing faintly under the dim lights. Alexander leaned forward, his voice low but insistent. "Tell me everything." Catherine drew a long breath, her eyes haunted. "It started before Emily was born. You were rising fast, Alex, building your empire. You thought your enemies were only competitors, but it went deeper. There were people in your circle, powerful, dangerous men who saw me as your weakness. They made threats, subtle at first, then direct. One night, I came home to find a note under my door. It said if I stayed with you, if I carried your child, neither of us would live to see the future." Alexander's fists clenched on the table, rage simmering beneath his skin. "And you didn't come to me? Didn't trust me to protect you?" Her tears glistened. "I was 22, terrified, pregnant, and I didn't want to gamble with our child's life. I thought leaving was the only way." His heart thundered with grief and fury. "You should have trusted me. We could have faced it together." She shook her head. "You don't understand. The threats never stopped. I went into hiding, changed addresses, took low-paying jobs where no one would notice me. Every birthday, every milestone, I thought of you, but I convinced myself she was safer not knowing who you were." Alexander closed his eyes, pain cutting through him. 22 years of laughter, first steps, first words, all stolen. "And now?" he whispered. "Do you still believe she's safe?" Catherine looked away. "Now it's too late. She knows." Across the city, Emily sat alone in her small bedroom, the glow of her phone screen lighting her face. She scrolled through article after article about Alexander Carter. The billionaire, the philanthropist, the ruthless negotiator, the man who had stared at her like a mirror of his own soul. Her chest ached with questions that had no simple answers. She glanced toward the kitchen, where her mother sat silently with her tea. Everything suddenly felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. In the restaurant, Alexander stood, his voice steadier now. "If she is my daughter, I will not lose her again. You can't hide her from me anymore, Catherine." Catherine rose slowly, meeting his eyes. "I won't stop you, Alex, but she has to choose. She deserves that much." The following evening, Emily agreed to meet them both at a quiet park near the river. The autumn air carried the scent of falling leaves, and the lamps cast golden halos on the winding path. She arrived first, her arms wrapped around herself. When she saw Alexander waiting by the benches, Catherine beside him, her steps faltered. Alexander's heart clenched at the sight of her, his daughter, flesh of his flesh, yet a stranger shaped by years he never shared. "Emily," he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "I know I don't deserve this chance. I wasn't there. I didn't even know. But if I had, I would have moved heaven and earth to protect you." Emily's jaw trembled. "Why didn't you come looking?" "You're Alexander Carter. You could have found us." His voice cracked. "I tried. I searched everywhere. Catherine made sure you vanished so completely that even I couldn't find you. I thought she was dead. I thought both of you were gone." Emily turned to her mother, betrayal flashing again. "Is that true?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I hid us well. I thought it was the only way." Emily's anger warred with the ache in her chest. "You both took something from me. One of you with lies, the other with absence." She turned back to Alexander, her voice breaking. "And now you want to what? Pretend we're a family?" Alexander stepped closer, his eyes burning with sincerity. "No, I don't want to pretend. I just want a chance to know you, to be in your life, even if it's only a little, even if it's on your terms." The raw honesty in his words silenced her. Catherine reached for her daughter's hand, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to keep you safe. But maybe it's time to stop running." Emily looked at them both, her heart torn, her world unrecognizable. She thought of the emerald rings, twin symbols of a love that had never died, of secrets buried and now unearthed. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of choice. Finally she exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can forgive either of you right now, but I do want answers. I want the truth, no more lies, no more hiding. If you can give me that, maybe we can start something." Relief flooded Alexander's face, though he didn't smile. He only nodded, solemn, grateful. "That's all I ask." Catherine wiped her tears, whispering, "Thank you." The three of them stood beneath the glowing park lamps, uncertain of the road ahead but bound by blood, memory, and the fragile hope of reconciliation. For the first time in decades, Alexander felt the possibility of redemption. For Catherine, a chance at forgiveness, and for Emily, the beginning of a story she never knew she was part of. The emerald rings shone in the night, no longer symbols of loss, but of a family, broken, fractured, yet not beyond repair.